Hello and welcome to Foreign Policy Focus. This is episode 94 and I am the show's host, Kyle. If you're just tuning into the show for the first time, this is a podcast that runs every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. The shows, I hope to get them out in the morning, but they usually come out in the afternoon, about 30 minutes in length, talking about foreign policy from a non-interventionist perspective. With talking about foreign policy, sometimes I branch out a little bit more and talk about things having to do with whistleblowers, the police state, immigration, issues like that I think are related to foreign policy. And I typically try to focus on the parts of the stories that are most related to foreign policy. So I may talk about the impacts of the drug war on Mexico, or I may talk about the militarization of police, but not really talk about the problems of the inner city and the problems of policing in the inner city, like stop and frisk procedures and stuff like that, just because I think it really doesn't fall under the umbrella term of foreign policy where some of the other issues do. I talk about economics as far as, the debt, the national debt is a problem and that the war has ramped up the national debt so high and how much money the wars have cost us, and then the economic disadvantages of going to war and spending 16 years at war. But I'm not going to meddle with SEC policy, really the Fed all that much and stuff like that. So, if you're libertarians or on the left, I hope you could listen to this kind of podcast just because the focus of the podcast is really the foreign policy issue, and that's why I want to cover most. So if that's what you're interested in, then check out the show. Most of the shows I am covering news stories. Like the first one I got today is Harvard's treatment of Chelsea Manning, and then I got some stuff on Syria, the UK subway bombing, Israel, Iraq, and Osama bin Laden's son. But that these are kind of things that are going to be covered on the show, and then I try to update every Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Sometimes I get a guest on the show to talk about something more in depth. The most frequent guest I have is Will Porter, who is a very good non-interventionist writer who publishes articles on antiwar.com and the libertarianinstitute.org. Alright, so there's a little introduction. I know for those of you who are new to the show, it might be helpful for those of you who are longtime listeners. I hope you were able to suffer through that 2 minutes of that introduction. And let's get into the news of today. First thing we have is Harvard had scheduled Chelsea Manning to come and give a speech at the school. Chelsea Manning recently released, I believe, April or May of this year from her 7-year jail sentence because of releasing the war logs to WikiLeaks. I really won't cover in this podcast just because it's way too much of a rabbit hole to dive down, the importance of the war logs. But, one of these days, hopefully I'll get somebody who knows a lot about Chelsea Manning's leaks and why they were so important, and how, one of the myths that I do know is not true is that they didn't get several members of the CIA killed or anything like that some people suggest. In addition to having Chelsea Manning speak at Harvard, Harvard had offered Manning a title of visiting fellow. I'm not sure exactly what the title of visiting fellow exactly means, but it's a prestigious thing that the school will issue to people who occasionally come and lecture at the school. Another scheduled guest to speak at Harvard is current CIA Director Mike Pompeo. Mike Pompeo heard the news about Chelsea Manning and, along with a host of other people, expressed a lot of anger towards Harvard University for giving Chelsea Manning the title of visiting fellow, or planning to give Chelsea Manning the title of visiting fellow. Mike Pompeo, and I think others, but there was a large reaction from the right-wing mainstream media, the right-wing conservative media, and even the right-wing base in general a little bit, being very upset about Chelsea Manning's new position at Harvard, and then Harvard decided to go ahead and cancel the plan to have Chelsea Manning become a visiting fellow. I think it's just kind of a bad thing to do from Harvard's perspective, I guess on that level, on what, just my first reaction to it is, why offer it if you're going to take it away? If you offered it to Chelsea Manning, you obviously had a very good reason to do so, and you thought that was backed up. So how quickly they retreated is kind of upsetting. Have some guns and stick with what you're saying. Also, I find just kind of an irony here that this time it's the right-wingers who have been, yelling for years that the left-wingers are snowflakes, and that's why Trump got elected, and, we got the Milo Yiannopoulos and Ann Coulters of the world. Ben Shapiro's speech at Berkeley, that kind of stuff that gets canceled, and now we have the right wing bullying the left wing out of, getting one. I would definitely think Chelsea Manning would now be considered some kind of progressivist activist. Not going to debate the merits of that on this podcast. Like I said, that's not what this podcast is for, but that's just kind of the scenario here. And I found some, irony in it. The bad thing for Harvard is they could have had a win-win here. Not only do they now have Chelsea Manning as some kind of loosely designated faculty member, but they also got rid of Mike Pompeo, who's only going to come to their college and preach hate. I mean, the new thing that the CIA has going on is now the CIA says, well, Afghanistan definitely not being bombed enough. We want to get authority from the president to start dropping drone bombs on Afghanistan again. So how disappointing, that the United States has two kind of drone programs. I guess the Department of Defense has their own drones, and then the CIA has their own drones as well, and the CIA is mad that they can't get on the Department of Defense's racket in Afghanistan. But that it's never enough, that there's always another department of the government that's advocating to stick their noses in another conflict, and there always has to be more war and more hostility and more money spent on it. And it's all a negative, of course, and hopefully the president doesn't grant the CIA the authority, but it was just really disappointing that the CIA would even ask for it in the first place. So on the Harvard situation, where we stand now, I guess, is that Chelsea Manning is still invited to speak at the campus, but will no longer be named a visiting fellow. I think the way it worked is that Harvard announced there was a plan to give Chelsea Manning that honor or that designation at some point in the future. But the Mike Pompeos of the world and then the just conservative talk media who was like, Chelsea Manning got a whole bunch of CIA officers killed, blah, 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 which isn't the complete myth in all of this. Not even true. Nobody died because of the Chelsea Manning WikiLeaks. You could look that up and find that information. It's out there. It's not hidden at all, and it's pretty mainstream. It amazes me that in 2017 we have people in the media still talking like that. The next story I have is Representative from California, Dana Rohrabacher, offered Trump or attempted to offer Trump a deal from Julian Assange. Rohrabacher had met with Julian Assange, I believe, last month, but it may have been earlier in this month, and they had discussed Assange having proof that Russia was not the source of the DNC leaks. I've covered that in past episodes, one with guest Will Porter. I will be sure to link to it in the show notes page for anybody who's interested on what I think and what Will thinks happened in the whole Russiagate scenario. But the conclusion that, Will reached and argued in that show was that Russia was definitely not behind the DNC leaks, that, of course, Hillary Clinton blames for losing her the election. So Rohrabacher wanted to approach Trump, but was only able to approach Chief of Staff Joe Kelly. Of course, Joe Kelly, another general in Trump's administration, apparently didn't take the deal to Trump, but the deal was that Assange would give Trump some kind of proof that Russia did not provide the DNC leaks and wasn't responsible for that information. I really have no idea what that information would be, if it's either maybe proof that Seth Rich was the leaker or if somebody else was, or maybe, WikiLeaks will incriminate, Julian Assange will incriminate somebody and they hacked it illegally. I'm not sure how that would go down. But that was the offer from Julian Assange, and then he would get some kind of pardon or guarantee from the Trump administration that he will not be prosecuted for anything he's possibly been accused of up until this point, whether it's leaking information, espionage, being labeled a hostile intelligence agency, or what seemed like a fairly bogus rape charge against him. Then he would, be pardoned of all those potential crimes. It looks like after Rohrabacher brought this to Joe Kelly just let it die, and I'm not sure who took it public, whether it was somebody from Assange's side or whether it was somebody from Rohrabacher's side, but somebody who knew about the offer brought it out to the public, and so now everybody knows, including Donald Trump. I gotta imagine that Trump's base will probably push him pretty hard to take this deal. I think his base doesn't hate Julian Assange very much and probably likes him more than anything. And Russia not being behind the DNC leaks would be huge for that base because, of course, that's kind of a portion of the illegitimacy of Trump's presidency. Is that, he was a stooge of Vladimir Putin, but if Russia didn't have give the DNC leads in that case becomes less credible. But I just have all these doubts that Trump's going to take this deal. This seems like one of those things that would be kind of too cool and too rare to actually happen in real life. In a Camp Pendleton training exercise, 15 Marines were injured. 6 of them are in critical condition and 6 of them in serious condition, with 3 suffering less severe injuries. I'll try to bring you updates on, the days to come and on the condition of these Marines to see if they make a recovery here, but it looks like they were training on an amphibious vehicle that caught fire. Again, with the size of the United States Army, this is just another one of those consequences of war that nobody really likes to talk about. Whenever you have all these training exercises and war games constantly going on, the more you do these kinds of things, the more, a mechanical failure is going to happen. These people are operating in dangerous situations, so eventually something bad's going to happen. And there's been several times this year now where Marines or other, sailors have been injured in some sort of either war games or training exercise or testing of new equipment, or U.S. ships running into other merchant vessels as they're carrying out shows of force against China or North Korea. Got a couple stories on our very good friend Nikki Haley, who I have to admit again, I was most wrong about. Probably the thing I've been most wrong about in the history of the show was me saying that I didn't think Nikki Haley could be that bad. If we remember back to Nikki Haley's appointment, I think it was really an outside shot for most everyone. Nikki Haley was kind of an anti-Trumper, and more importantly, apparently knew absolutely nothing about foreign policy. I really searched hard when she got nominated to be U.S. Ambassador to the UN to find some information, like some speech she had given on foreign policy. But there really wasn't all that much, and what was there was pretty surface level, showing that she didn't have a whole lot of understanding about this situation. And so the hope is that either, she just acts blindly and then gets things right every once in a while because, a broke clock is right twice a day. In her predecessors, Samantha Power or John Bolton were absolutely terrible and loved every war they ever saw and advocated for fighting several wars on behalf of the Al-Qaeda. It's just insane how terrible U.S. ambassadors to the UN have been. And Nikki Haley picked up that torch and completely sprang ahead of the pack. Since the first day she walked into that office, she has insisted that there is no point in talking to the North Koreans, which is insane. The country was at that time on the brink of developing a hydrogen bomb. And Nikki Haley is being offered a deal by China saying that, hey, the United States, you knock off the war games and North Korea knocks off the nuclear missile testing. And Nikki Haley saying, nope, we're not going to talk to them. That's it. Nope, not going to happen. And now we're in a situation where North Korea, at least theoretically, has successfully tested a hydrogen bomb. And, I'm not 100% positive whether they have or not, but it seems likely that they tested a very large weapon and that they have some kind of intercontinental ballistic missile capabilities or intermediate range ballistic missile capabilities that can inflict some damage on U.S. allies along with a very large artillery presence near the DMZ between North and South Korea, with a lot of big old cannons pointed at a lot of South Korean people and a lot of Americans living in Seoul. And so rather than saying, yeah, we're going to talk to them because, millions of people dying is definitely the thing I'm supposed to do as a diplomat, Nikki Haley from day one has said, nope, there's no point in talking. And it's unbelievable. It really is. It's like she's refusing to do her job. Even the newest thing is her pretty much refusing to do her job, saying, oh, we could kick North Korea over to the DOD now. And that seems to me like a fairly explicit admission that the United States is done talking with North Korea, and it's all in the Department of Defense. That James Mattis, you're now in charge of the North Korea file. It's past the diplomacy point. It's past the talking point. Now, Trump has only been in office for 8 months now. And so it's not like they've been talking to the North Koreans for years. Obama didn't talk to the North Koreans either. Pretty much the policy since Obama has taken office is the North Koreans must give up their nuclear weapons before talks begin, or we're not going to talk to them. Now, this policy has been absolutely disastrous, of course. If you look at the progression of North Korea's military capabilities from the time Obama took office and really put this policy in place till the end, or till the current point, it's led to the rise of a nuclear capable North Korea. And the policy has absolutely nothing to show for it, but that's where we are right now. And Nikki Haley, like I said, not going to talk. Then she had more recent statements on Assad that were absolutely terrible. From day one, she was kind of on the Assad must go wagon, which seemed kind of odd because, at least candidate Trump was on the, Assad may not be a good guy, but ISIS is definitely worse. So we're just going to bomb the hell out of ISIS and then that'll be it, which isn't a policy that I necessarily endorse, but is a policy better than let's fight on both sides of the Syrian civil war and bomb Assad and ISIS. That way Al-Qaeda could come to power. I'm not sure what the end result of that would have been. She backed off that statement just a little bit in the day or two right before the false flag chemical weapons attack in April. Immediately after that false flag, Nikki Haley jumps all over it and is again Assad must go. In her current statement, while softened on the Assad must go perspective, is still in the end results in Assad must go position. Trump made some statements that I found particularly disturbing on North Korea. Donald Trump said that the U.S. is prepared to defend its civilization from North Korea. The part about it's so disturbing is that now at least Trump seems to have this belief that North Korea is an existential threat to the United States. That's certainly what that statement means, is that we will defend our civilization from them. That at least North Korea's end goal would be to wipe out the American civilization. And so who knows what kind of positions or what kind of policies that Trump will pursue if this is what he actually believes. Now, Kim Jung Un in North Korea come out and say, look, our intent is equilibrium with the United States. I'm not sure if equilibrium is exactly the right word. I think North Korea is looking for a balance kind of a power where the North Koreans could definitely do enough damage to the United States allies to prevent the United States from ever attacking Kim Jung Un. And so that would be kind of a deterrence level of power. I don't think that North Korea's goal is to have 11 aircraft carriers and F-35s and bases in 100-something countries. And so it's not equal power with the U.S. It would just be good enough power. I read an article by Josh Stimpson. In the article, Stimpson argues that Trump needs to go to North Korea and just talk to Kim Jong Un there. This is exactly what needs to happen. It would be great. Everybody thinks that, this would be insane, but it wasn't that long ago that Nixon went to China when China was a communist enemy of the United States because China wasn't the worst enemy in the world. And just like the situation now, North Korea isn't the worst enemy in the world, and if we could get along with the North Koreans, then the world could be a better place. So maybe one day we could hope that Trump would be the kind of brash, reckless leader that would do something so outside the bounds that, Barack Obama, even the first black president, couldn't do, and that is go talk to the North Koreans. We had a bomb explode on a UK subway, injuring 30 people. I'm not sure how many of the people were injured in the actual bomb attack. It sounded like a lot of people got injured in the chaos caused by the bomb attack. 2 people have so far been arrested in connection with this bombing, and then the UK lowered their terror level alert. The UK seems to believe that this is somehow related to terrorism. So if it comes out that, these are either refugees or terrorists or whoever who carried out this attack, I will update those details as they come. In Israel, we have Israeli settlers destroying 70 olive trees owned by Palestinians. Olive trees, I believe, take a long time to start to bear fruit, so it's like a 10-year commitment. And for a lot of people, it's a main export for the Palestinians. It's something that they are able to package and sell, and I'm not sure what percentage of their exports is, but for some people it is a family business and a very, it's their livelihood. Mondo Weiss reported on these groups of settlers. 2 different groups went on raids and destroyed all these Palestinian olive trees. I mean, I guess just for some perspective, everybody, I'll definitely link to the Mondo Weiss article in the show notes for today's page. Go to it. The Iraqi government is beginning to start a military operation to liberate the Anbar province of Iraq from ISIS. Across the border in Syria, we have bin Laden's son, who is apparent, I think in his late 20s now, and is apparent heir to the Al-Qaeda throne, saying that the Syrian rebels need to keep fighting the jihad in Syria. I think he specifically addressed the one-time US-backed HTS group in the province. it seems that the war really can't be won by the Syrian rebels, and so unless they're going to try to fight to create their own state within Syria or something like that. Also, very interesting, I would say in the coming years, we could have another situation where this is really going to be weird, where we will have a new generation of bin Laden's leading jihadists against a new generation of American military members in the Middle East. Remember, in a year or two, it'll be 18 years, and all these kids going and fighting the wars won't have been alive when they started. And so we really are looking at I would say, official starting point of a generational war in Afghanistan, Iraq, and just the war against terror and jihad. We have a lot of conflict going on around Deir ez-Zor. Over the weekend, we had reports that a Russian jet bombed near SDF forces. FDS are the Syrian Democratic Forces who are backed by the United States. The backbone of the SDF is the Kurdish YPG, who is at least loosely allied with the Turkish group PKK, which Turkey labels both the YPG and the PKK as terrorist organizations. The United States has backed the YPG now to the tune of $2.2 billion in Soviet-era weapons. I think a lot of this money was spent on ammos and just light arms and stuff like that. I'm not sure if there's an additional money being spent on more updated weapons that they're selling the Kurdish fighters, or the United States is just providing all that technology, like we're providing all their air support. They're basically just the foot soldiers for the United States war against ISIS and soon to be Assad maybe. We've had the SDF issue a statement saying that they would not allow the Assad government to cross the Euphrates River. The city of Deir ez-Zor sits mostly on the western side of the Euphrates River, but there are the villages and surrounding area on the western side. When the SDF issued this statement, Russia issued a statement saying, well, Assad's forces are already on the other side of the river, so what are you going to do about it now? Russia has, I guess, bombed by an SDF position near the outskirts of the city of Deir ez-Zor and injured 6 SDF fighters. I've read a report that Russia has kind of denied the attacks, but I've read other stories that suggest more that Russia kind of admits doing it. So hopefully in the coming days, I'll be able to update everyone on what exactly happened with the potential bombing of the SDF position. Of course, it was near Deir ez-Zor that I think on the city of Deir ez-Zor, the military base that overlooks the city, that the United States actually bombed a Syrian Arab Army, which is Assad's army, position, killing up to 80 fighters and allowing ISIS to temporarily take that position in that military base. And if Russia did do this, it does seem that the United States has not freaked out so far, and I haven't seen a whole lot of reactions from the Trump administration like now we're at war with Russia. Alright, that'll do it for today's show. I do have a couple big announcements to make that I'm really excited about. The first is that this podcast is now running on the homepage of the Libertarian Institute. It's on the right side of the screen, right in between Scott Horton's podcast and Will Gridd's podcast, so I'm honored to have it on there. Thank you to the guys at the Libertarian Institute, Scott Horton, Jared LaBelle, and Sheldon Richmond, who have given me the opportunity to have the podcast up there and hopefully get out to a lot more listeners. I'm sure some of you who are listening to this show today are only listening to it because it is now on that website. And also thank you to all my listeners who have helped the show to grow. I say the podcast has been out there for about 7 months now. We're approaching episode 100, and I'm so thrilled with the success the show has had, and it's because so many of you are taking the time to share the show and recommend the show to others. So if you could continue to do that, I would absolutely love it. The other big news I have is that Scott Horton has agreed to come on the show and discuss his new book, Fool's Errand. I'm going to set up a question in the coming days in my private Facebook group, Foreign Policy Focus. Let me know what you guys want to hear Scott talk about. For those of you who read his book, any questions that you have, I have a few in mind, but I'm always willing to see what my audience is interested in, and I can ask them questions around that. Alright, with that, I'll wrap up the show and saying thanks everybody for listening. The website for the podcast is either libertarianinstitute.org/Kyle, foreignpolicyfocus.libsyn.com, or you could find it at the Facebook page Kyle's Files. I publish a daily news roundup Monday through Friday. Tons of news stories on foreign policy and anything else current events related that I'm interested in. So you check that out at the Libertarian Institute on the blog or at my personal website, Kyle's Files blog. .com. I also posted up in, my private Facebook group and on the page Kyle's Files, and it's usually on the Libertarian Institute Facebook page as well. And you can follow me on Twitter at KYAALE. Thanks, everybody.